Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Uncut and After Show. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they premiere, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also below this video you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy. Speaking of Patrons, I'm going to do a quick shout out to all of you who do support me on Patreon. So a massive shout out of thanks and appreciation to Michael Kahn, Patrick Gunnels, Banter, Will Brax, Melby Styles, Troy Shuker, Bose Nail, Joseph Pizarro, Samson, Maris, Mobile Max 777, Neo the One, Lost Cat FE, Rob W, Open-Minded, Reese Pound, Del West Watson, Mike, Muted, Dick Earth Skeptic, NA Literalist, Maria Nealand, Unbelievable Productions, Blue Ridge Ranger, Rob H, The Real Gabster, Windrider, Liam Nedrick Jr., Abraham Mohammed, Naibai, Adrian Quintana, Skeptic936, Life is Short, Fireball X, TheFlatEarthChannel.com, Texas Mike, Edwin Johnson, and David Wayne Foster. So another massive thank you to all of you for supporting me on Patreon. Now I'm going to hand over to whoever is in G Plus and Discord so you can enjoy their conversation while I set up for today's live show.
It's a 15 megaton of TNT atom bomb. Interesting way to describe something, which would have its own units, its own joules, but...
Just wrapping my head around what you just said, you're saying that they qualify in terms of how much equivalent TNT would have to be set off to produce the same explosion?
Yes.
I understand. So the qualifier is how much TNT?
Yeah, the units, almost, aren't they? The units of an atom bomb are how much tons of TNT it is. I see. In processing that, I'm thinking, how would that be useful? Will it be useful when he's like, what's comparable? I'm like, that's non sequitur. Doesn't prove the... I kept calling it a chemical reaction, but nuclear reaction that's claimed to be taking place, that doesn't prove it. And if I was to offer him up an equivalent, I'd be like, well, it's measured in how much TNT, so what bomb are you talking about? Well, according to your rhetoric, it's this much TNT that would be the equivalent, so about that much TNT, I guess.
But aren't all bombs, whether they're nuclear or not, qualified by that?
By what? How much TNT?
Right, the equivalent of one stick of dynamite, is just like it's an arbitrary convention used to describe the explosion.
What's the measure called, Adam?
Hello.
Hey,
It was only a point, but as far as I'm aware, they're saying it's an atom bomb which was equivalent to 15.2 megatons. But it's just you're probably right, Paul. That there may be, but it's nonsensical that you would equate something of volumetric mass as if you could have that much TNT, maybe even. Do you see what I mean? And
there is megatons.
That's the issue.
What I was trying to drive at was what's the measure. So it's megatons, and it's megatons of TNT by whatever equivalent measure they've given megatons when they're qualifying explosions. So the amount is megatons. It was a 65 megaton bomb.
Yeah. I'm sure that's how it is.
Bombs again today? Bombs away again?
It's only because I literally, before I started the show, I'd been editing that particular discussion out. Because I listened back to it and I was like, actually, that was quite an interesting conversation. Probably because I didn't care. You know what I mean? I just heard someone making a claim. I'm like, oh yeah, have you got proof of that? I've got no background information. I don't even know if it's chemical or nuclear. Clearly, I didn't even know the name of the reaction. But I just hear a claim and that's for a standard, right? That the evidential standard doesn't change regardless of the claim. So I'm not flexing my muscles by doing that. I just heard a claim and I'm like, that's interesting. I've heard people contest it, but that's never really interested me particularly. I don't care. But by the same token, he did, didn't he? He was very passionate about it.
Yeah, you can't validate it. Same thing on Gem Panda. I just jumping around looking where I can go, waiting for you to, set your thing up and come on. And they're talking about the sun, like they know what it is. And they're trying to say that people that just throw their hands up and say, well, I don't know, then that's it. Goodbye for them. Get away from us. I'm like, well, do you know what it is? Oh, you're one of those guys, huh? I said, no, I just don't. I can't get there. And as far as I can tell, nobody can get there. So how are you telling me what it is?
Exactly. You've got to know what you don't know to a certain extent. And when things like that happen, it reminds me of Jeranism's backstory into Flat Earth. Because he described looking at history. He was selling books at the time, and a lot of them were expensive, older books. So their rarity increased their value. But he realised at a certain point he only went back so far. So he started digging into it, and he and his wife came to the conclusion that they'd have to start throwing everything out. Until one day his wife said, well, what about the Earth and the nature of the sphere Earth that's claimed to be beneath our feet? And his response, instinctually, was to say, well, that's a bit far. We'd have to throw... When we say everything, we don't necessarily mean everything, now do we? Well, do you or don't you? And he kind of explained that you have to reach the point that he has to say no. You have to accept on face value that there's very limited actual knowledge that you possess, and therefore a little dose of skepticism when it comes to almost everything isn't in any way harmful to you. Now, if you get into the, well, you're a denier of it, it's like, I'm not denying it. No, I just don't know, but you seem to think you do, therefore, fine, justify it to whatever extent you feel has justified it to you. Now, if that standard for you is just, well, I read it in the paper, or I read it in a book, or there's extensive government-based research, or there's extensive university-based research, or there's extensive scientific evidence, or there's extensive scientific evidence that's moved on to theory, it depends on what line you pick that you want to stop. Now, some people will stop at the, I saw it in the paper. Some people will stop even sooner than that. I read the headline. That's where some people stop. Now, I'm not that person. Excuse me. You know what I mean? When you find out you've been deceived on this level, you're going to, by nature, become more skeptical of everything, aren't you?
Yes, and the other thing is I heard that even with the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, you hear stories that within a couple of weeks, they were living back there. I don't know if that's true either.
Yes, and you have a further rhetoric to justify the detonation in the air, which facilitated the lack of nuclear fallout. Yeah, we all know the backstories, right? We all know what's come from the storybooks. We know what history has been given to us in this regard. And where it doesn't make sense, I'm almost certain, like with everything, there's going to be a justification or an explanation that may or may not add up. But the bottom line is, right, if this is something that just occurs, i.e. these chemicals, if they're chemicals, whatever, elements that come into contact with each other cause mass destruction, then presumably that can be observed somewhere in nature also. You know, is it most definitely a man-made phenomena, in which case, let's see them actually make it? Not going to be natural, not going to be scientific, but by the same standard, it's like, okay, but I haven't experienced this. Now, does that mean I deny its existence, that a man can or has made this? Or that it isn't something to be absolutely terrified about? And that's where we get to the nitty-gritty of really why it piqued my interest. Because it's somebody telling me you should be scared of something, isn't it? You've got to be scared of this.
Yeah, it's a fear factor, and it's the fear element.
Well, from experience, when that happens, I go on high alert. Oh, yeah? Why should I be scared of this? Tell me all about it. And when you start getting called a denier, you go, okay, this has clearly been subject to some sort of propaganda and brainwashing, because some normal Joe, which is the guy that came yesterday, normie, is so hopelessly I can never say that word, immersed in this particular paradigm that he's prepared to defend it vehemently. I mean, I couldn't give a crap, but you go, well, you want to be scared of it, and you want me to be scared of it. There's obviously a reason behind that. I don't know what it is, and you probably don't either. But you definitely can't justify your faith in this nonsense. And at this stage, not being a denier, it's just from what he gave me, and just a nonsense, just a belief. Does that mean it is? You know, it might be proven true at a later date. Not a denier.
Seems like
same thing with dinosaurs. I had a big thing with my son yesterday with dinosaurs. I'm like, how do we know this, that they existed? And how do we know that this gasoline that runs my car is coming from this fossil fuel. And he's explained to me it's not just dinosaurs, it's everything that dies in the... Yeah, I know that. But we're talking about dinosaur right now. How do we know that there was this Tyrannosaurus Rex and this Brontosaurus, and they're finding all new dinosaurs, and now they're finding out that they weren't reptiles, that they had feathers? How do we know?
We don't. My wife got into this very shortly after I got into Flat Earth. I don't know why, but she got into the dino hoax. And she was intrigued by it. Now, I don't know how that came across her path, but to the point where she wanted to go and actually check out the claims that there weren't any real bones on display. So we did. We went down to London, at great expense, I might add, and went to the Natural History Museum and had a look. And had a little snoop around. And, you know, that was not off my back, it was off hers. She was intrigued to know whether or not the actual claims being made were cemented by what they displayed in the boxes at the history museums themselves. And for us, that's down in London. So we went and had a look, and the claims that were being put out there that they weren't real were validated to her satisfaction. And she had a snoop around and asked a couple of curators, I think, that were floating around about what was going on with the actual big dinosaur that was on presentation in the main auditorium. And they said it's being replaced with an actual whale that we've got in storage that's just as enormous, if not bigger. I can't remember. I think it was actually capable of being looked at. I think we did actually go and see it. It was ginormous, this great big blue whale that they got. I don't know if it's taxidermy or something, but they were like, that's real, unlike the dinosaur. Because that was obviously the line of question that she had for them. Is this real? No, it isn't. Okay, well, it's what's happening with it. Well, it's going to get removed. And something real is going to go in its place. That's what they told her.
Sounds like I picked the wrong week for golf. I miss an explosive conversation.
Yeah, it was. But the dinosaur thing, see, we have the Museum of Natural History in New York too, and that always fascinated me as a kid. And it's just funny that the things that fascinated me as a kid, I find out may not be real, like dinosaur and space.
Not a holotype specimen is.
A what?
Holotype specimen.
No.
So John Le Bon went on this rabbit trail, or rabbit hole rather, as well. And it led him to a really remote part of Australia where they had allegedly dug up these actual bones, i.e. genuine specimens. And they were on display in this... I look at the videos recently. I hadn't seen them when he first produced them, but he showed the town. It's like predominantly, obviously, dinosaur-based tourism community, and it was like a ghost town. There was very little going on there, and this isn't because of COVID or anything. This is a couple of years ago. It's just very little going on. And he went and spoke to the curator again, asked a few questions about this fragment of what looked like... I can't describe it any other way. I'm not being skeptical by describing it this way. This is just what I saw and what JLB saw in the flesh. No pun intended. Was just what looked like a bit of wood. And from that bit of wood, they extrapolate out what you see in the museums, made of plaster of Paris or plastic or whatever they're stringing it together with, all held together with wire. And that's where it starts. It starts with a couple of fragments and expands out. Now, I've had this in the past where people have said, no, they found entire dinosaur skeletons, and you look into it and it seems like somebody has literally stumbled upon an entire dinosaur skeleton, and you go, okay, minus the head. And you go, okay, that seems a bit weird that somebody would just be walking their dog and find a dinosaur, but there we go, that's the story. Interesting though it is. So that's where that rabbit hole ended for me, and like you, Neil, you're like, okay, that seems like a pretty good story to back the evidence. The rest of the claims have come from little fragments.
Are you trying to kill the tourism industry, Nathan?
I don't think the Natural History Museum will be affected by this 10th man. I've got to be honest. They've got a whale.
Well, a whale is obviously something we could see today. I'm just talking about how that little town, wherever it was, if it ever came out that it was a piece of wood that they reified into a dinosaur, there goes that town's tourism industry.
Well, it was already very bleak from what John Le Bon had shown anyway. So, as I say, that's something that dinosaurs does it interest me? Do I care? Not really.
Well,
it ties into the evolution.
What that guy was.
Go on, Neil.
It goes to what that guy was saying. He got all his information from where we all got it, from what they told us in the books, or newspaper articles, or the history books about what happened in World War II. I had a guy tell me that his uncle was on a ship that delivered the freaking bomb. I said, "You're telling me he was with Quint from Jaws?"
What are you talking about? Quint from Jaws.
Yeah, Quint, when he tells his story about delivering the bomb.
Oh, that was Indianapolis, right?
Yeah, I said, "You were with Quint?"
I see where. Okay, I got the connection now. Well, isn't it all about deception? And deception is taking a truth and then deceiving you about it, so it's not. So you don't see that truth; you see the deceived version of that truth.
You're describing the occult. That's what you're trying to drive at.
Well, I'm just talking about my experience in life. Like I could be at a place with someone else and observe an accident. And if the policeman comes and says, "What did you see?" Of course, I just tell him what I saw. And then I listen to the guy next to me and he says, the same story, but slightly different. And I said, "Wait a minute, I didn't see that." And so there's variations, but I'm going to call that deception. And then there's outright deception, where you take something and you either purposely keep something out of it or add something to it to deceive whoever you want to deceive.
Yeah, that's the when people describe the occult, all occult means is hidden, to hide things from people. 90% truth, 10% lies.
So any ballers, while I was gone, come up with good flat earth arguments like they've been doing lately?
To drag it back to the dinosaurs, if I could. There was lots of stuff. There's a massive industry in China where they use molds, taking collagen molds and producing all these things in a more bony looking way. But I just stumbled on this Chinese paleontologist uses leftover chicken and fish bones to build dinosaurs. So there's her and the team tucking into dinner and then washing the bits, putting it together. Smug paleontologist, and then at some point, there you go, look, that's her demonstrating her dinosaur that she's discovered or finished at lunch. There it is. There you
go. Hi, lads.
Yeah, hey, not so necessarily.
You can have your dinosaur and eat it too.
You can indeed.
Not necessarily on dinosaurs, but there's been plenty of evolutionary hoaxes that have been exposed. And, the dinosaur, I'm not going to call it a hoax, but what we are now discussing, however you want to term it, is along those lines, right? It ties in nicely to the evolution story, which we know is bunk.
I know, yeah.
Have you ever seen Lloyd's Pie? Lloyd Pie, Everything You Know Is Wrong. Have you ever seen that documentary?
Lord Pie, yeah.
It's very good.
You just said yes, I have.
Yeah, and Lord Pye's the guy that attacks all of genealogy, isn't he? He was one of Walt met him, I think, a number of times. He's full. Doesn't he go into the Star Child and use all the skull data, Lord Pye?
Yeah, he goes into stuff that's kind of a bit out there a bit. He did, and he died in 2014, but he used it. But the way he deals with the Piltown man and all this other stuff, it just shows it all up to be such utter rubbish.
Oh yeah, that's I see what you mean. I thought he was more talking Star Child, but yeah, he does to demonstrate all the interspecies or things they tried to attribute some form of evolution of man to are just Even with like Lucy, the was it Australopithecine and all that kind of nonsense, isn't it? He demonstrates there's nothing there. I think that's.
Yeah, they just move the bones around to make an ape look more upright. So it looks like it's halfway between an ape and an upright standing person. But the truth is, the ape was actually, they brought the arms and shoulders up instead of bringing them down where they should be. That's all they were doing. So they just messing around with the structure of the bones of an ape to make it look like they'd found the missing link kind of stuff. You know, it was a lot of rubbish.
So basically, Brian, they were up to monkey business.
Yeah. What's the basis of it all? What's the basis of it all? It's to try and make it like we just evolved and that we're not created. It's the whole attack on God.
Yeah, exactly, Neil.
It's always the same.
Exactly, Neil. That's how I view it. It's just tied into the evolutionary nonsense. Therefore, you know, it's to be treated the same as when they expose some hoax. And, you know, in that regard, I mean, in terms of the evolutionary hoaxes that are well documented. Someone's always got a new missing link, right?
Yeah.
I just turn off the computer and refresh it, and it comes right back up.
Oh, you're full of them today. You got a lot of catching up to do, huh, Ten? Well, look at that movie back in the early 80s, or was it late 79? Altered States. Did anybody ever see that? Where the guy goes in that tank and he freaking goes all the way back to the beginning and turns into a freaking Cro-Magnon man or something like that?
Remember the name.
It's called Altered States. William Hurt was in it. It's like a very popular movie.
Yeah, it's so popular that I can't remember it.
How you sleeping, Mario?
Hey.
Good to have you.
I know Anthony's seen the movie. He had to.
Which movie's that?
Altered States.
Nope, not for
William Hurt. Where he goes in a tank and they take some hallucinogenics and he goes back to like the beginning, comes out of the tank like a caveman or something.
No, not familiar.
What?
I think you're just
Go
describing society in general, Neil. This is what's happening to people now.
Hold on, guys.
Google it.
Plus, just 1 second. Did you have something to ask, Don? Go ahead.
Yeah, what happened to that lady that actually found protein in I think it was blood cells or white cells in bones? What happened to her actually?
A very interesting backstory to that. Quantum Eraser, I think he got in touch with her over this particular discussion, or somebody was discussing it and he pulled the subject matter apart. It was one of the very early videos I watched from him. He has released it again because it was done on Cathexis' channel, on Quantum Eraser channel since, or has he? It might be one he's keeping in his back pocket because it was a really, really good episode. It's just been such a long time that I looked into that. But again, totally tied into the evolutionary argument, and some of the aftermath of that was discussed by Quantum Eraser. So if he shows up today, I'll ask him to get a link for you, Don.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Yeah, I mean they got a narrative or there's an agenda because they attacked her pretty hard. I mean, they didn't like those results.
No, they didn't.
Well, it continued into the aftermath and then got debated and discussed, and that's where QE comes into the timeline in that regard. So yeah, well worth checking it out. I don't know the title of the video. PZ Myers something or other. I can't remember the name, full title. But I will. I'll ask him from the team.
I remember that. Yeah, if you look into his videos, you should find one which says PZ Myers on it. And you should be able to find it there in his playlist, I think.
Nice.
Hopefully that's enough to go on. In the meantime, I mean, if you did want to dig it out.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're all aware of what is going on though.
Well, similar to DNA. That just destroyed everything up until that point from an evolutionary standpoint. Once they, Watson and Crick figured it out, and then everyone jumped into that whole world. And the videos I've seen on DNA and the structure of it, the information of it, I mean, just so complex. And this can't happen unless that happens, but that can't happen until this happens. And I mean, it's just amazing stuff. And it's like, these are the same people who believe everything happened, boop, just like that.
It is going to be one of those shows that he does get into.
What am I actually looking at? What am I looking at? How am I seeing?
Thanks, Neil.
You're wonderfully and marvelously made by the creator.
Why, that doesn't blow your mind when you're like, how am I actually seeing this?
No, the eye is an extremely complex thing. It could not just form by accident.
Well, I was just about to say that, but Neil cut me off. So I was going to say, in the PC Myers show, or that video, I don't call it a show, whatever you want to term it as, he does Quantum Eraser does cover functional sequence specified complexity. So it's not like it's a light-going show. It isn't.
But all that is only the same as the stuff from the globe. Because that lady I saw years and years ago, probably about 2011 or 12 or something, this physicist lady in America who was saying the sun cannot be what they're saying, and there's no way it can be as big and as far away as they say. There's just no way. And she was using the. I think she was actually, if I remember correctly, I didn't know the thing at the time, but I think if I remember correctly, she was using the inverse square law of light as part of what she was saying. But she had these other details, and she just nailed it. Like, never heard of her again. Never heard of her. And she was on this program, everything. Like, never heard of her again. Couldn't find her on the internet.
You think they whacked her?
No, they just ignored her, and you can't find her on the internet. She doesn't turn up. You're not gonna.
It was actually one of those that's segued into that lesson for me from Quantum Eraser in terms of debate, that is, which is to say that the use of fallacy and how people will debate, how they'll descend into atom, that's human nature. In other words, it's, if you look at it another way, which is how it was being put to me by QE, it's translatable into any subject you can relate to. In other words, you can spot a claim being made and spot a fallacy being used to justify it, then you can argue about almost anything. It makes no difference. And I think at the time it was that example with evolution, which is something I wasn't particularly interested in either, that was used as an example. And the fallacy that was being used as the example was denying the antecedent. If it's in existence together, it will be buried together. We find it buried together, therefore it's in existence together. So that logical fallacy, there isn't a use of that in flat Earth. It's just used in evolution arguments. But you know, it just sparked my interest because it's like, I bet I'll find one eventually. Someone will use that fallacy in flat Earth. To date, they haven't, not yet. But yeah, it's translatable if you know how to debate. It doesn't matter if it's politics. It doesn't matter if it's flat Earth. It shouldn't matter. You just have to recognise the tactics that are used when a claim's being made, whether or not it's being backed, all that sort of stuff.
I think creationists would use that. Like a Kent Honvid would use that assumption, like with regards to OO parts buried together. So you've got a human footprint and a dino footprint together. He would then draw that assertion that they lived together at the same time. So it's used on both sides. That
it's the denying that it's. I didn't phrase it correctly. It's the denying it. So if they're not buried together, they didn't exist together.
Oof.
The antecedent being that they are buried together, therefore they are in existence together. You then deny it by saying they are not found together, therefore they didn't exist together. Denying the antecedent
makes sense.
It's not a common fallacy on this platform.
I've not heard that. Not used.
Yeah, just get into, like you said, you've heard it because Kent Hovind's presumable defence to the denying the antecedent fallacy would be to actually get them to affirm the first instance claim of their existence or the timeline. I don't know what it takes. I don't watch Kent Hovind, but I would assume that he's got to come up against that a lot and would therefore have a a way of unpacking the fallacy quite efficiently.
Well, I think my recollection of that is, and it wasn't from even Ken Hovind, it was just in that realm, is that evolutionists described a certain footprint as being a certain dinosaur. And then in the Paluxy River find in Texas, they found the man's footprint next to that exact type of so-called dinosaur footprint at the same time. Based on their findings, that's what they came to. And then you say, well, I thought these things existed before man. So how is it possible to have that footprint you said came from a dinosaur right next to a man's footprint? Whether it was a dinosaur or not, obviously it's not, but that's what they said.
Well, maybe it was the giants, because weren't there giants on Earth? The Nephilim?
They're in San Francisco and they play ball.
What you've done is you've flipped a denying the antecedent into an affirming the consequent to rebut it. That doesn't work either. I've got enough time to get into this. We've only got a couple of minutes before the live show starts.
The Bible says there was giants on the earth. All I'm saying is maybe those are the dinosaurs that people think that they have discovered.
Maybe they're whales.
The giants relate, I think, to humanoid form giants. When they talk about, it's things like, I think, is it the Leviathan 10th, and there's a few other words that would fit.
Yeah, one is describing, I believe, a land-based. I can't remember. The other one is ocean-based.
Yeah.
But it's a description of two large types of animals.
And Christians jump on it. Yeah, Christians jump on that scripture and say, see, it's in the Bible. There were dinosaur.
Yeah, but they can't even get the parables of Jesus right half the time.
I think knowledge and the Bible don't contradict if you just understand there were animals that are now extinct.
Yeah,
in the Bible.
Exactly.
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also below this video, you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you're currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected. And if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. One last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now, we are joined by Brian's Logic, Neil, Sleeping Warrior, The Adam Meakin, 10th Man, and a shout out immediately to James Mays, who says, welcome to Flat Earth Debate, folks. Morning to the panel and QE, and morning to all of the good people in Discord and Arwin who just joined late. Welcome, one and all.
Morning, morning.
Hey, good morning.
Hello, good afternoon.
Anthony is here as well. I don't know if they call him.
Yo.
Hello, hello. It's good to have you all. I'm glad you're all enthusiastic. Good to see. Any evidence of physical geometric sphere edge horizon, formerly known as Earth curvature?
No, but we can
Mathematical
calculate it into existence.
Mathematical evidence.
Well,
Physical.
I have 3 pilots. One of them is Blue Marble Science, who's claiming that what I say, which is information concerning flights and how airplanes fly, they're basically stating that what I'm saying, that comes directly from NASA, Lockheed Martin, everyone says the exact same thing, that I'm wrong. Even though all the official sources state that you can't have lift without thrust, and the lift causes the nose of the plane to tilt up the way. But I'm wrong, according to all 3 pilots. One of them is Blue Marble Science. 3 commercial pilots. So according to them, if they hold a constant altitude and fly with their nose above horizontal, that means that they're correcting for the curvature that they would have to correct for if they were flying over a sphere Earth. And the fact that I'm saying, the fact that I'm saying that they are holding an altitude and flying with their nose above horizontal and flying in a horizontal line means that what they're saying, which is exactly the same thing, is right. What I'm saying is wrong, and that means they're flying around a curved surface, and I'm wrong because of reasons. Well,
So, as far as I understand it, and correct me where I get this wrong, because I don't profess to know anything about flying a plane. When you pull back on the yoke, that changes the rudder or whatever it is, the fins on the back of the plane, what they call elevators. It changes the elevators on the tail. Now, as I understand it, and I might have this wrong, but you can change the pitch of the plane whilst maintaining your elevation. Is that true or not true?
Well, you can raise an elevation with the nose up, or sorry, you can drop an elevation with the nose above horizontal, or you can bring the nose below horizontal and raise. But as far as flying, like, you can change the pitch of the aircraft, but the pitch, like what you're going into there is technicals that you don't need to go into, because if you add more thrust, that creates more lift, and the more lift creates more tilt of the nose. That's why the nose is always above horizontal. So if you add more thrust, it creates more lift, which is a pressure differential. That's another thing. I'm told that the pressure differential, where high pressure is trying to go to low, which is creating the lift, I'm told that's not entropy. I keep being told that. That has not part of the entropy description, supposedly. But anyway, if you add more thrust, right, that creates more lift, and the more lift creates more tilt of the nose. Now, you can change the pitch. I mean, if they want to take off, they use the other factors they have to basically make sure the nose goes up and the tail goes down for takeoff. But I mean, you like what that is kind of like not a mute point, but it's kind of slightly separate, because what I'm talking about is just the basics of lift and what it causes. Lift causes the nose, thrust causes lift causes tilt. So you can't. It's impossible, because they fly in a horizontal line with their nose slightly above horizontal. So it's impossible to fly around a curved surface. Their only claim is that they hold an altitude. So what? If that altitude is equal around the surface of a globe, then you will have to correct constantly for the curvature. Not just drop, but curvature.
So does this not reduce down to the argument over what is flying level, being a level curve or a level straight line?
Well, I cover this.
Can't be a level curve.
Yes, please, Adam. I've got you
many
presented. Yes, please.
Okay, I'll do my best to bumble through. I've not read this in a long time, but I obviously asked the same question a while ago. How does a plane behave in level flight is the first thing. And the first thing you consider is, look, there's the plane. You can see that's the familiar angle. The pitch of the plane is one thing, look, but the direction of travel of the plane is the yellow line. And this is what's called straight and level flight. Straight and level flight is kind of, let me switch the slide. There we go. It's achieved generally, and when I did this, it wasn't these little planes I was researching. It was a passenger plane. So what I then did, the data analysis with an accelerometer on. But a straight and level flight is described as generally the plane's at a 2 to 3 degree upward incline. The nose never angles down during flight. Altitude is lost generally by reducing this angle a bit or reducing speed, which decreases the upward thrust also a little bit. Basically, a slight tilt backwards is usual for normal flight. Now, I took a load of data and accelerometer data on the middle hour of a 2-hour flight and recorded it, and it showed nothing. It was between 1 and 3 fluctuating, or 1 and 4. But it never went into the negative. It never went and tipped over. Now, the reason Brian's describing that is it's important, because if we're flying a plane across a level plane, everything's absolutely fine. Nothing changes. And I'm going to use the term direction of gravity, i.e. what is down. If we are flying in a straight line path vector generated by the gyroscope within the plane, then that is a straight line vector. And that's what the plane's flying on. Now, underneath the plane, on a flat plane, you'll see, look, as we go across the surface with the vector there, the vector's one way, and down at the beginning of the journey is exactly the same vector as down is in the middle of the journey and down is at the end of the journey. If we are on a curved Earth, then as we begin the journey, at the end of the journey, actually the direction of down in relation certainly to the gyroscope fixed within the plane changes. It keeps it say it will require tipping over. If you see here, look, by the time we get to the end here, we do have a different direction of down. Now this would have to be, as Brian's saying, would have to be compensated, and after 1,000 kilometers, the angle of direction of down would have changed 9 degrees. So what would that feel like to the passengers on your ball Earth as you're traveling? As they go, look, there's a different direction of down, but we've defined via the gyroscope in the plane that this is a straight line vector the plane is flying on. So it is not changing its orientation. What's changing underneath is the Earth. Now, this plays out in a number of impossible, nonsensical ways. That being, you can either feel that the passengers would be tilting back in their seat because the plane would actually start to take a realistic position, like with the yellow arrows, across the ball Earth. These are the results. But that's the point. You would have to have a forward tilt to reorientate to negate the effect of the ground reorientating itself and redefining down if you were on a ball, because that would be a consequence of traveling across a ball where down is defined in a specific way in relation to the geometry.
So what you're saying is the plane flies along a tangent straight line and it's not following the curve of the Earth.
We know the straight line is straight because it's defined by the gyroscope, within the plane stuff. So it's taking its straight line path and the vector it flies across from the gyroscope. That's what maintains it. It's not drawing or referencing the Earth as any part for its flight other than altitude. But in terms of its position, that's defined by the gyroscope. That's why they set them up, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry, I go after.
How would Wolfie respond to this in his, remove his bravado out of it? What would he say?
There isn't anything he could say. It's a fact. That the reason my video is getting such negativity and so many views, because I have way more views than I have subscribers. on this video. I normally have, and most of the time it's from the borders. But the reason I'm getting such negativity is because what I'm doing, like what Adam did, was brilliant. He had demonstrations of how the direction of down doesn't change and it would have to change. What I'm doing is like taking a little section of what Adam did, and I'm just focusing on the fact that lift causes the nose to tilt up. And the more thrust, the more lift, the more tilt. And they have to do that to fly horizontal, just to fly horizontal. So the only way for them to fly around a curved surface and fly, to fly around a curved surface that's falling away from you at magnitudes underneath, there is no way that a plane would ever be designed to fly as it is and be successful. It can't. To do what it does, which is to fly horizontal with its nose above horizontal, for it to always have to fly that way, as that's the way it's designed, and that's what it does, and that's how lift is generated and how it's maintained. And to do that means that it's an absolute impossibility to fly around a curved surface that's falling away underneath you. And the main thing I've noticed in my comments, especially from the three pilots, Blue Marble Science and the other two, is no one has addressed my argument. Nobody. They won't even state my argument. They jump on everything and anything. I said this about that. It's not really entropy. All this kind of rubbish. And I'm going into nonsense about how entropy is just a description, and that I have to deal with a lot of red herring arguments. But nobody is addressing my argument because they can't. And Wolfie hasn't even come over. I think Blue Marble Science might be making a video on it. I don't know. But Wolfie hasn't even come over to say anything. And Wolfie would normally come in and just attack my videos at random, but now he has nothing to say. All I'm getting is a force of gravity, right? And when I challenge that, I get nothing. Nothing, I should say. Sorry. So there's no way around it. Like Wolfie would have nothing to say to what Adam said. All Wolfie could do was call Adam. No offense, Adam, but he would just say, "You're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about," and that'd be the best he could do. Just an attack, a personal attack.
I've gave this presentation, Brian, to two sets of pilots. One was, it was quite weird. I was taking a flight to Italy, and I'm kind of finishing it up, and there was a flight enthusiasts club, and I'm a bit more aggressive flat earther back then. Go flat smacking people for no reason. So I've presented it to them, and they're like, "Ooh, that kind of response." But the actual pilot that's taking them up was like, "Might have a point there, lad." And then the second time was actually on a flight. I always get extra leg room, and the seats are in threes. So I'm sat with the extra leg room, and the bloke next to me is a pilot. So I'm just chatting to him. He's flying over to pick up a flight the other side. So I said, "Would you mind looking at this?" And he went through it, and he says, "I haven't got an answer." So I think I would argue that honest pilots say that. Bloody hell, that's actually profound. I've never thought of that, and I don't have an answer for it.
And I bet you that's why Wolfie has never addressed you on this, because all he can do is personally attack you, because they have to do that. It's a character assassination, because it's either that or honesty.
2018, Brian, this has been out since, and it's never been attacked or challenged. It's just sat and been ignored.
Yeah, it's absolutely epic.
They need drop, and they haven't got any. That's the bottom line. They need the ground to drop away from the plane, and it doesn't. It's just that simple.
Well, they need even more than that, Nathan, because to drop, as Adam stated before, remember when Adam done this presentation before, the drop is only one part, because that will only deal with altitude. Then there's the curvature, which means they can drop altitude with the nose above horizontal, but they can't go around curvature like that.
Right, they've got to rotate the axis of the plane around the curvature that's not existent by way of a drop that they're not having to negate. So yeah, I understand entirely. You two, it's been a great conversation. Thank you, both of you.
Thanks,
hey, Nathan, can I chime in on that? You know what a GEV is?
You'll have to tell me. No.
It's a ground effect vehicle. there's many others. There's a Luna class Ukrainoplane. It's a plane that hovers across the surface of the water. So one of them states that the payload is like 1,000 kilograms, and it cruises up to about 90 knots with a range of 250 nautical miles.
Okay, I'm aware of boats that can get up fast enough to get on. I've forgotten the term for it, but where they've got a very small amount of the boat actually touching the water, up on the. They call it. There's a term for it. I don't want to get it wrong.
Hydroplaning.
I thought it was hydroplaning, but I thought that's when you go through a puddle and your tires log up. But if it is called hydroplaning, then yeah.
Sing that. No.
No, it's an actual plane. It's a plane.
I've seen that. I've seen that Extrana plane. They take advantage of lift, but there's a certain point where they basically stay. Is it like 25 foot or something, or 40 foot above the water, and they just fly in a straight line? It was the Russians built it, I think. They just fly in a straight line across water.
Over the Baltics and that, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
They couldn't use the sea. They had to use the...
Okay, it's not necessary to go through the technical jargon in this regard. Right. You want to make your point, whoever it was that brought it up from Discord that didn't see.
Yeah, it was me. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, so 250 nautical miles, that's about roughly 280 miles. I'm trying to figure out how much curvature they would have to adjust for. I mean, they're skimming across the surface of the water.
Right, they're not. That's the answer. But there's a big problem in terms of what they should be experiencing and aren't. And it's tied in perfectly. It's just closer to the water in this example than a jet with Adam's example. But yeah, exactly. Good point.
It's 0.01. So it's not curvature they're experiencing. It's angular realignment of which way down the vector is going that they should have to compensate. You can compensate for the height easily. As I say, just trim a little bit of speed off and you'll lose thrust and you'll decrease in altitude, so you can affect the drop without this, but it's the angular change. And that, so what was the distance you said?
About the range is about 250 nautical miles and about at 90 knots.
What's that, 300 miles or 280 miles or something? Let's call it
280
miles. 250 miles. So they would actually have to account for 3.5 degrees. And that's the thing that would be significant to the aeroplane, that would require realignment and adjustment. Otherwise, everything falls apart. All of the thrust calculations fall apart because down's in a different direction. The supposed atmosphere's curve, so the wind's going in a different direction, but that vector's still been maintained, and therefore that angle's been generated.
To bring it back to Brian's point, the lift that's required to be generated requires a certain angle of the craft, whatever it may be, wherever it may be. And Adam's point to add to that is that it's going to have to rotate round at least a couple of degrees, but that's not conducive with the actual dynamics of flying. They're not doing that at any point, regardless of the distance, be it over a short stretch, which is only a few, however high above water, or in a jet. They're not doing that. They're not rotating the plane around an alleged curvature that's taken place beneath the flight to reorientate themselves against that position on a sphere. They're not doing that, regardless of whether they claim they're accounting for a drop that isn't occurring. That's Adam's point tied into Brian's point.
Well, it's actually
really sucks is
I'll go after you. Like, go on.
No, I was just gonna say what really sucks is like this is taking my mind to, well, what about thrust in space, right? And then I was like, oh, that's right. They'll just say there's some kind of weightlessness, which is why this is possible. And then, you know, some other mechanic. And I'm like, well, that's the trick, that without this word gravity, there would be weightlessness. And there's like, so it doesn't even allow you to think about a real situation where you'd have this heavy ass rocket that's obviously way denser than no medium. And then it'd never get a chance to ever do anything in no medium, thrust or nothing. We think about that because we're like, oh yeah, without the earth or the mass, everything is weightless anyway.
Yeah, but you're arguing in Narnia.
Correct, Neil.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. We have, that's what I'm saying. they've hijacked our thinking and saying, well, if it's not gravity, then you're forced to think about a world with weightlessness, from which you have to create the reason that things would stick to the floor.
But that's gravity as a force, that's the problem they have, because gravity as a force is out of date since 1915. Whereas that's not theory of general relativity. So they're screwed with that anyway. But what I was going to say just before the point is lost, we'll come back to what Elijah's talking about, because that's also interesting. Is one of the things that one of the pilots was asking me, is the pilot kept on saying to me, according to you, we'd have to keep on adding trust. Where would we get all the energy? Right? And I knew what he was doing. It was a couple of days of this. And what he was doing was begging the question that for me to say that the plane is flying straight would mean that it's constantly gaining altitude on the globe, because it wouldn't be following the curvature. And I said, and I was asked by another guy who came in who was kind of
hold on, Brian. Can you hold that thought? Because I want to. Can you hold on to the next thought if I expand on what you've just said? So what Brian's saying is, there's a begging the question fallacy in place where the justification is, I'm maintaining my altitude above a spherical surface, and your argument now gets repositioned to, because it doesn't automatically beg the question of maintaining altitude above a spherical surface, it would be ascending off it, and it isn't. So it's introducing a begging the question fallacy and getting you to defend the alternative to begging the question by saying the alternative to it maintains its altitude above the sphere, regardless of the mechanics, would be to say it flying off into space, and it doesn't, and ask you a further step in terms of how much thrust would be required for that scenario after he begs the question. Yeah, that sounds typical. Hope you held that thought long enough to carry on from there, Brian, but yes, thank you.
They were able to calculate the
Hold on, Owen. Go ahead, Brian.
No, that was very good, Nathan, because you said it very succinctly, exactly what I was saying. I got to the point where this other guy who was joining in with him said to me, he says, he's a fairly intellectual kind of guy. He says to me, so would you answer, would an airplane need thrust to gain in altitude? And if it took away thrust, would it drop in altitude? And I said yes. I said of course, right? And they said you just debunked yourself, right? I said no. You know what I mean? I didn't actually say no. I just left them off. I only disagreed with them today after about 4 days. I just left them off. They were begging the question all the way. But what they don't realise is the fact that the plane is holding a constant speed and a constant altitude, and it's not accounting for down, the change in the direction of down. And lift makes it impossible. You can't fly an airplane horizontally. You can't fly an airplane at all without lift. And lift means that the plane's nose has to be above horizontal to fly at cruising altitude for any length of time. It can't, like if you dip the nose below horizontal, it messes with things. It doesn't fly. You can do it, obviously jet fighters and everything that do it, and you can drop altitude that way, but you're just going to end up heading towards the ground. You're going to have to straighten the nose out again.
But they've been fairly crafty, because they've said to gain altitude you've got to add thrust, and therefore to descend you've got to lose thrust. And therefore, if I assume, and this is where they're begging the question terminology comes in, that I am maintaining a level altitude, they're not actually saying maintaining my altitude above the sphere and just negotiating the drop mandatorily without me doing a thing. It just does it automatically. It just maintains level flight. Because that's what we do. We maintain level flight, and we assume that maintaining level flight is following the curvature of a sphere. Therefore, the antithesis of my begging the question is to fly off it into the space vacuum that I'm going to assume also and never mention. And when you say that I'm not descending and decelerating, losing thrust to negotiate my begging the question drop that I'm not experiencing because I'm quote unquote maintaining level flight. Well, maintaining level flight means you're maintaining level flight, and they're supposed to be drop. So they managed to weasel in your their begging the question fallacy and negate any defence you might have about them having to have drop, because they're just claiming, I beg the question that level flight is actually curved. It's moving around a sphere. But they just don't mention that. They don't tell you they're begging the question. You've got to spot that maintaining level flight. It's like, well, that's my argument. Yeah, they're not going over any drop. And as Adam would put it, they're not rotating to account for that either. And as Brian would say, they're nosing up the whole bloody time. So there's no drop involved in any of this, but they just beg the question and say, yeah, it's level around my sphere, I assume.
Exactly, Nathan. What they're doing is what they're doing is they're actually, the reason I didn't address it for 4 days, I knew what it was and I didn't address it, but I kept on getting more and more of them asking me the same question because they were following this pilot's lead. And I didn't address it, but the reason I didn't was because I kept on saying, address my argument, because what they're doing is, it's a reverse of the proof fallacy, because they're trying to put me into how come you're not constantly adding trust. This is what they're trying to ask me, why the pilot wouldn't be constantly basically they're saying, according to you, the pilot would always have to add trust. Whereas the real argument is, my argument is they, to even just account for just drop alone, and this can only be for a part of the journey, is they have to constantly be pulling back on the power, which they don't. This doesn't happen.
Yeah, well, they're keeping you on the ball.
That's it.
Yes,
hold on, Brian. Yes, Neil, exactly. They're keeping him on the ball, so you have to ask what they mean by level. Level flight, you say? Level?
Yeah.
Right, constant altitude then. Yeah, constant altitude against my sphere. Force them to beg the question by declaration, and then laugh at them. Oh, right, so level means round a curve. That's not what level means. When you're maintaining level flight, you're not maintaining around a ball mandatorily dropping without having to account for any drop, and reversing the burden of proof and telling me that I've got to justify why you're not reducing the thrust to not account for the fact that it's not dropping, because level means it's dropping automatically. It's like, yeah, they convolute it in such a way that you've got to defend something you haven't actually claimed. What, I've suddenly in a position where I've got to defend a claim that you'd be accelerating off into a space vacuum? That's not my claim. Level flight. Well, that's level. Where's the drop? Why aren't you rotating around a sphere if you travel a vast distance? None of those things get addressed. It's just, why aren't we accelerating into space then? You've debunked yourself. No, I haven't. Earth's flat, level flight. Level.
Yeah, but that's exactly. They're just switching the argument back onto me, and that's why I had to avoid it. I avoided it for 4 days, and today I just threw it out there. I just told them, no, you're just begging the question. Address my argument, or stop wasting my time. Because that's what's going on. All I'm getting is personal attack, and people not addressing my argument, and people trying to reverse the argument, because the argument is very simple. The aerodynamics of airplane flight proves that the airplane needs lift, and lift causes the nose to tilt above horizontal, just for the plane to fly horizontally. For the plane to fly in a horizontal manner, it has to have the nose above horizontal. That means where is the curvature and drop accounted for? It's not.
Well, that's why I never liked that argument when they say, well, if you were on a sphere, if you just kept flying, you'd fly right into space. No, because then you're right on the ball Earth with them.
And it's on the front page, isn't it, Brian, right? It's on the front cover. What is level flight? When you're maintaining level flight, what is that? Well, they've hide the dirty detail in the title. So level flight, you're maintaining level.
Right, to tell Brian back to that, if I may, the GEV, right? In the description, it says typically it is designed to hover over a level surface, usually over the sea, by making use of ground effect, the aerodynamic interfraction between the moving wing and the surfaces below. Some models can operate over any flat area, such as frozen lakes or flat plains similar to a hovercraft.
Exactly. They use the same exact instrumentation as an airplane. The same instrumentation. Like any of them that would, even if someone like the Plan or whatever it was that was around some years ago, like that wouldn't have had, let's say, a ring laser gyroscope, but it had all the other stuff. You know what I mean? It had gyros, with all the normal stuff. I wouldn't have had maybe an accelerometer, but what's the difference? I mean, one of my more recent videos is called Horizontal Mean Sea Level, and that got a huge amount of hate from the ballers because I pointed out what mean sea level was, and I showed how it's just an average in different places. And mean sea level for me and for someone else is not the same place. It's not the same thing. It depends on the tides. And I showed what it all was. and it's only a very simple video, but it takes away what they want to believe is level. Because if you took away the definition in what's that online dictionary that QE often refers to, there's one of the dictionaries online, and it refers to
Merriam-Webster.
Merriam-Webster. Way down the page, it says, I can't remember verbatim. It's like level is conforming to the sphere, a curve, all the curve of the earth, or something like that. And it's just one, and then it contradicts itself above it or below it. It contradicts itself. So it's a nonsense. But without that, they actually have no other definition anywhere officially on the internet without that one little bit that's way down the page that states anything about level having anything to do with the center of a sphere. And if you look into what mean sea level is, that is nothing to do with the center of a sphere. All elevations are taken off of mean sea level, the local mean sea level, which is different everywhere because tidal effects are different everywhere. So the whole it's all these different averages. Then there's an average world mean sea level, but so it's all just a load of averages. That's all it is. There's none of it has anything to do with the center of a sphere. Nothing. And that's why surveying take all their elevations off a mean sea level, local mean sea level. They don't take anything from the center of a sphere, of an oblate spheroid. Sorry.
I just got a super chat from Godzilla37. It says the ballers have run from their model for years now and are still not in space. They should be there soon. Thank you very much for the super chat, Godzilla37.
But they actually are in space, because that's what they're talking about a lot lately. When you go there, they're talking about space and astronauts and where they're going. That they got a rover on Mars with a helicopter. Come on.
I heard the word curvature used. How would we measure curvature?
Well, we're waiting to hear that. We're waiting to hear how they supposedly measure it with years, but they never did. They only show how they measure flat, and then convert mathematically to globe. They start off with a pre-assumption. No, they just start off with a pre-assumption, John. The zenith the surveyor takes is brought to the center of an oblate spheroid WGS80 globe mathematical
that's the assumption.
Yeah,
that is the assumption.
Yeah.
Zenith. Well, when they say zenith, they're presupposing that zenith, that's a plumb line, if you like, going straight through your head. That continues along the radius to the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth. That's what their zenith is. So they take a zenith and they go, right, okay, here where I stand, here's my zenith. Right? Let's look up in this datum where that is. Now, if it's a North Pole centred datum, you'll be pointing off here in England at whatever. How many degrees are we off? I don't know what degree we are. I should really know this. It's terrible, really. Anyway, pointing off at, let's just call it 45 degrees. I'm somewhere wherever 45 degrees is on a presupposed spherical datum. And that means that I'm sticking down at that angle on that particular part of the Earth. Now, obviously, because it's, for them, only referenced from the top. The datum doesn't, but you're referencing it from you being on the top. That's how gravity works, according to them. So you've got all of these assumptions in place. You take your zenith, and then you look it up on a sphere datum. And once you've done that, you then apply the actual measurements using Euclidean maths. So you're measuring it flat. Now that flat measurement you take after you've assumed a zenith to a presupposed spherical Earth centre is going to be called a tangent. That'd be its tangent to the sphere. Plane. The surface you're actually measuring. So the geodetic surveyors are going to measure a tangent plane. Plane because it's flat, tangent because they're presupposed to spherical Earth.
Well, I was going to say, if the horizon's claimed to be refracted, then how can you have a tangent that doesn't make sense?
You can't. We've debunked all of this with the black swan. They require a physical geometric tangent point to be the edge of your view into the distance. So if you were to hold up a basketball and you were an ant a millimetre above it, as you looked out, what you'd see is the edge of the basketball blocking things that would be on the edge of the basketball. That would be your view. That would be a geometric tangent point horizon for the ant on a basketball. Now, for us to be on a bigger equivalent of that basketball, we too would have a physical, geometric tangent point horizon like the ant on a basketball. It would be a physical limitation to our view into the distance based on their claim we're on a sphere 3959 in radius. And if we were on a sphere radius 3959, then every distance to that geometric limitation, tangent point horizon, could be no more than 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. That is the geometric limitation based on you being on a sphere. Now, when we demonstrate that the limitation to our view, that would be the horizon, is beyond that which would be experienced by an ant on a basketball as a physical geometric sphere edge, then you can rule out us having a geometric physical limitation in the form of a horizon, i.e., or ergo, the horizon is not the edge of a sphere blocking our view. We don't have a tangent point for a horizon. It cannot be used to measure sphere. Every assumption of a sphere is based on that predication that you can measure its geometry. And you cannot. The horizon is not the edge of a sphere. The horizon is not a tangent point from a sphere to derive any geometric R values from. We do not live on a sphere. The Earth is obviously and observably and measurably flat.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to. There's no R value. That's no way to measure it. But it doesn't exist.
No.
Does that mean we've finally answered one housekeeping question then?
Well, we've only asked one so far on the show. Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge horizon formerly known as Earth curvature? And the answer is no.
Next.
That would have been my fault.
No, that's all right, Brian. I've taken a slightly different stance with the housekeeping questions, which is previously I've said, no, we've got to rattle our way through them so that any newbies that come... We're not a newbie show, are we? Anybody who's recently subscribed and you're under the misapprehension that you can come here as a newbie and go, yeah, I get it. There's going to be stuff that goes over your head. The longer you stay tuned... This is me encouraging people to stay tuned, right? Stay tuned, because there's more to discover as you stay tuned. But it is true, you know, we do get repetitive because this stuff doesn't necessarily sink in the first time you hear it, especially if you're talking about what we were discussing in the pre-show, functional sequence specified complexity. When you come to subjects like that, you're going to need it 10 times. So yeah, but it's not base level stuff. Paradigm changes from heliocentric to flat. Those are dealt with by people like Mark Sargent, and I'm not knocking him in any way or belittling that process. If anything, it's far more popular than what we do here at the tip of the spear. So, you know, when it comes to housekeeping, I'd rather Brian extensively detailed a circumstance in regards to the physical geometric sphere edge horizon, the drop that would be assumed in terms of the flights, the angle of attack of the plane, the lack of rotation that Adam's detailed since 2016. All of these things are worth discussing for anybody who's come here that's not necessarily a newbie. And I would assume that most of the audience aren't, actually. So I think they've, you know, based on the amount of people that have recently subscribed, thanks to Taboo Conspiracy, Russian Vids, Mark Sargent himself, and everyone else who's got smaller channels like Paula, like Brian, like Flatzoid, like even Chemo. All of those people have bought people who are aware of this subject. They wouldn't be on those channels if they weren't. So they're going to enjoy these slightly more advanced discussions that you're exploring with the fundies. And honest, Brian, say I didn't respond to their begging the question fallacy for 3 or 4 days. You know, it's like, why disclaim that other than to say that you're processing this stuff in real time and dealing with a load of what you've actually detailed, which is a whole bunch of people who've got behind the grand master of this argument and gone, detail why you're not increasing thrust, detail why you're not increasing thrust. You're just detailing... You are now contextually now just detailing how they have approached this as the sheep that they are. They follow the master right through the fence or through the gate, and that's all they're doing. Meanwhile, you've taken your time, you've not responded, you've not bit the bait, and then just accepted for what it is. The argument is a begging the question fallacy. It's been repossessioned with a burden of proof reversal fallacy for you to justify something that stands with their begging the question fallacy in place when you answer their request. It's totally unreasonable when you pull it apart. But when you've got a whole barrage of fundy trolls telling you that you've got to answer this question that's positioned with a begging the question fallacy, it seems like you should just debate every one of them in your comment section. Spend hours and hours and hours going through this process of begging the question with them and answering their unreasonable request within their begging the question. Just you'd go nuts, wouldn't you, Brian?
Well, you would, Nathan. You see, there's a bigger tactic going on here. This is for even people who might be new listening to the show. There's a bigger tactic going on here, because my video is actually called Calling Out Wolfie 6020. I can't remember, there's an extra part to it, but that's the basics of it. I'm calling out Wolfie 6020 because Wolfie 6020 has trolled us and abused us. Basically, he's basically was very condescending to us since he turned up in 2016, I think. That's 5 years of a commercial pilot who's been attacking us, basically. Now I'm calling him out on this very, very simple thing to do with airplane flight, or to do with flight and lift. It's a very, very simple thing, but it's very, very honest. Anyone can understand it. Anyone can look it up, and it's stated by NASA, Lockheed Martin, everyone. Everyone states this is the way airplanes fly. So the point of the.
Sorry, I was going to say I'll go out on a limb and say this isn't the first time. I'm going to ask for support from Sleeping Warrior and Adam in this regard, because correct me if I'm wrong, Adam. When this was presented prior, we were. And I say we, Sleeping Warrior and I, were goading people into baiting, or how did Anthony, poking the bear in a more efficient manner. And I vaguely remember this being one of those examples that Anthony specifically directed at Wolfie20 following one of your presentations of it, and you've done it half a dozen times. Chances are Sleeping Warrior sloped away. We'll see if Adam's still around. Hey, Adam.
Yeah, like I said, it's been out there, and and as you said, I think Tony did the bear a little bit with it, and I genuinely ask, it's out there. It's my understanding. I researched it. I read papers on how like I say commercial planes fly. Not the little 2-seater things there, but actually how the plane I was going on and take the measurements, how it worked, particularly how it descends with regards to thrust. Again, when you're coming down, you tilt your nose up even more, so you've got lots of upward thrust, but you can reduce the speed. You know what I mean? So that's how a plane works, and that's why it sits there. And I still wait for someone in the flat Earth and the ball Earth side to challenge it. But like I said, I've presented it to genuine pilots face to face. You know what I mean? And not had anything other than bloody hell. And we've had not even standard ball a week attacks on it, to be honest. They don't seem to want to touch it.
Well, it doesn't help. It doesn't help. It doesn't help when you've got people like Sean Hawkins that try and. Not only does he not understand the burden of proof, he flips it like he's basically dumb. The claim is that we live on a sphere and the Earth curves. That claim needs to be substantiated, and we're saying there is no evidence for it. When it requires evidence, it's them that's got to prove their claim. It's not us that needs to debunk the assumption, and there is no benefit of the doubt given. They've got to prove their claim. And when we say, hey, there's an issue, they've got to present the evidence. It's down to them to present. You've got people on their side that are pushing not only the burden of proof reversal, but they're deliberately confusing the claim. The claim is that we live on a sphere. It's them that's got to prove it, not us that's got to disprove their story or rhetoric. They've got to prove it. We don't really have to do anything, just ask for the evidence.
Precisely. That segues nicely as we're not near the end yet, but it's middle of a live show and I've already plugged it in the pre-show. But I've just been editing that exact scenario, but with WMD versus FED, which is the title of the video. You've got somebody who's presenting a claim. It's a positive assertion. I don't really have to do anything other than say prove your claim. Now, it doesn't matter if it's Globe Earth or WMD or anything else for that matter. If you've got a positive assertion, it's down to you. You're the bearer of the burden. That's it. You set about proving it. Or you just have somebody sat across from you going, I don't believe you. Interestingly, I was watching Friends yesterday, My wife's got well into the Friends since the reunion. And one of the episodes, you've got Phoebe questioning Ross on paleontology. And asking him, no, is that what he is? Is he a paleontologist?
Yeah.
Yeah, paleontology. And basically, she points out to him that he's got a belief system. He says, in this box is a box of scientific facts. And she pulls it apart in a very light-hearted way, gets him to question his belief and say, okay, there's a small chance that's not actually true, my little story I gave you to convince you of evolution. And when he questions it, she says, oh, God, that was so easy. Just to get you to question your belief. That's how it was left, with her telling him that just by asking a few careful questions and saying, no, I don't believe that, left him with the bit of doubt that she could leverage to say, this is a belief. Starting off as a box of scientific fact, I might add. Not science in the slightest.
Could I just finish off what I was saying a minute ago? I'm not trying to bring it back to that, just to finish what I was saying. My video is calling out Wolfie 6020 because of all the times that he has been called out and ignored it, because of all the things he has said and attacked us with, right? All these begging the question fallacies, all this nonsense like EQ mount telescopes and the eclipse and all this other rubbish, equinox, etc. I state it's put up or shut up, Wolfie. Either bring up the evidence that shows that you account for drop and curvature of your globe Earth belief, or go away. And what's happening at the moment is I have a load of people who are basically trying to find some weakness, and that's what Wolfie will come in and attack me on. But Wolfie's sitting back watching everything, I can guarantee you, and he's waiting to come in and attack me when someone else has found some kind of a loophole. And that's all these people have been trying to do, is find loopholes. And that's how desperate they are. None of them have addressed the argument. It's all trying to get me to address their arguments, and they're begging the question fallacies and all their rubbish. And it's all reversal of what's going on, because they can't address that argument. Because it's their claim they're flying around the globe. It's their claim it is a globe, and they are never addressing that. It's always trying to put it back on us to go into their begging the question world and reverse that. We have to somehow account for all their belief. That's what it is, isn't it? It comes back to they have a belief and they won't let it go.
Can you blame them though? What else can they do when you have no arguments? I mean, what are you left with? Tactics.
Before we get into that, so you can see that video on Brian's Logic channel, which is on screen for my audience now. I haven't watched that video because I'd given it a like and it didn't have a like, so I will check it out myself. I haven't watched this. I said I did yesterday. I must have just seen the thumbnail and not actually watched it, Brian. So I'll check it out as well. It's called Calling Out Wolfie 6020 Wing Lift, How an Aeroplane Flies. So check it out. Subscribe today to Brian's Logic if you've not done so already.
Much appreciated, Nathan.
So yeah, I don't mind. We've covered one housekeeping question.
Brian, you're now on 33, so if someone could help that out.
Hopefully you'll get a few subscribers. I've gained a few new subscribers. I'm going to do a quick shout out to Taboo Conspiracy, who part of his Globe Earth and Flat Earth Proof debunking series. He's up to video 6, I believe now, and video 6 was me. So he specifically asked me. I approached a lot of people, including him, to say, can you help me get to 20,000? And he, much smarter than I, got back in touch and said, well, actually, I'm producing a series about X. Can you give me Y? And I went, yes, I can indeed. So I gave it to him. He inserted it into a video, and it's essentially detailing how you can't have a sky vacuum, with a couple of people detailing on a blackboard and detailing with physical demonstration entropy increase. But check it out. That's on Taboo Conspiracy 3. And yeah, thank you very much indeed to you, Ben. Thank you very much. Really, really appreciate it. Very good video. So yeah, check out his full series. It's out. He's been releasing them. I don't know if there's more after this one. Hopefully there is. If not, great series already. There's 6 videos in that particular series. They're doing very well for him. And they're very concise, short videos. Debunking outer space, debunking gravity, debunking geometric horizons, pointing out spatial assumptions, all sorts of different things. But it's got a whole great concise series, and they're all less than about 5 minutes, maybe, or thereabouts, 2 to 5 minutes, I would say. So they're good videos to share with other people who just need a concise explanation of how something works or doesn't work. So I'm going to be sharing those videos a lot, Ben, just so you know. That's probably why I've got a few more views, because other people have done as I have, which is said, this is really good, this is really concise, I can share this with Joe Normie, and they'll get the point within 2 or 3 minutes. Brilliant work. I love it, Ben. Taboo Conspiracy, shout out to you.
Just to have Chocolate say what he said again.
Yes, I was going to go back to him. I'm on the ball. My memory's not that bad. But in terms of the tactics, just to get the segue back onto the track of the conversation with Wolfie, etc., etc. Do you want to repeat what you just said, Chocolate?
No, I said, well, I was telling Brian, well, what does he expect them to do? When you have no actual arguments, you have no evidence for your claims, what else are you left with? You're left with tactics. You're left with burden of proof reversals. You're left with begging a question. I mean, that's all you have.
So when you said that, obviously, if they were seekers of truth, if they saw that the position they held was false, they would jettison it and say, wow, I was fooled. I'm going to look into see how they fooled me. But they're actually become warriors for this fallacy, and they beg the question every time they open their mouth. So it's not as if these people want to be converted when truth hits a lie. They rather hold a lie.
Just looking at Ryan's channel there, you're certainly over the target, right? It's your most popular video ever, and it's only been out 3 or 4 days. And it's got your most number of views, so you're certainly over the target, bruv.
Yeah, I've noticed that actually. It seems to be getting a lot of views, and it's such a simple, very simple video. You know, I've been attacked on by the borders because it's so simple. You know, oh, you didn't talk about this. What about angle of attack? What about trimming for altitude? All this type of nonsense.
Or tactics.
Yeah, that's it. It's just simple. I said no one keeping it simple. Oh, you said something was claimed by, you said something was caused by entropy. I think I said it was due to entropy, and maybe I did say I'm not sure. I can't remember what I said. But I said yeah. But that's all. We can keep it simple. I don't want to start telling people about how entropy is just a description of blah blah blah. I don't need all that. Just I want people to be able to see it and go, yeah. And anyone who did see it, who wasn't a baller, went, yeah, that's the end of that for airplanes. Do you know what I mean? There was nobody who saw it and was on the fence. They were either a baller or they understood.
And if they are a baller, to get to that, I can't even remember to detail the full list of fallacies that's employed when asking you to justify why planes don't accelerate off into space when they're begging the question of level flight actually maintaining level flight above a curved surface. I can't remember all of those fallacies to detail them off in one sentence, but that was a description of what they're doing and asking you to do. You know, that requires mental processing. And at some point during that processing, you've got to, I would assume, if you're capable mentally, consider the alternative. And it's not tolerated mentally by those people. And that intolerance is pain.
Yeah, they have to character assassinate the person because they need to find something, because that's all that's been going on. And I expected it because I've dealt with it for so many years. They have to find some small thing, like I said, entropy, due to entropy. That was enough. You know, something like that. For them to jump on and say, he doesn't know what he's talking about, he can't be right, my belief still stands.
I love it.
Because that's what they need, you know.
You ascribe cause to entropy. You evil man. You didn't say as described by. Kick him out and hang him. You know, so what? Yeah, because of entropy. Yeah, misspeak. It's just simple misspeak. So what? Does it change your point? Did it change your point? I very highly doubt it.
It's got a name when they do that, though.
Majoring on the minors.
Yep.
Well, there was one guy called...
Well done, Neil.
Yeah, burn him at the stake. There's one guy called Jim Smith. Now he's like Agent Jim Smith from that's his avatar from the Matrix, and like he is a baller. But when And he asked me, he said it to me about it. I said, look, I said, entropy is just a description of phenomena we don't know the cause of. So I said, I said it as simple as possible in the video so people would understand. And I said, but it's not that I don't know that. And he went, yeah, fair enough. Do you know what I mean? He just accepted, well, that is the truth. Whereas the rest of them can't. Like, he must be a step ahead of them.
I've just read some of the comments, Brian. You've got to worry, mate, because it's not only just all had on, they're getting a little racist as well, aren't they? To be sure.
That's
justified.
Bit of that going on, and
I think that's reasonable.
That's all
I think that's only reasonable. Sorry, Brian.
They're in their feelings.
You're not did you become a Lucky Charm?
Hey, look, we don't want any troubles.
you become a You always measure your success by your enemies, not by your friends. So you're doing good if you got that many haters. Yeah, there's a lot of it's just ramping up more and more. And what the most telling part is the very person the video is for, who normally had no hassle coming in and attacking one of my videos at any time before. The very person the video was aimed towards, I haven't heard a peek out of, would be 60-20. Because all he can do is come in on what the rest of them are doing. He can't tell me anything more than any other person could tell me.
Because he doesn't need to do anything. He sent his agent Smiths for you. Right? That's why you even said one of them has a profile of Agent Smith. That's what they are. The little programs that pop up whenever the rhetoric or the narrative is challenged. Right? I've seen it in my face. I've seen coworkers I get along with swimmingly. And then so all of a sudden, when this topic is brought up, it's like a different person has been summoned to defend the nonsense.
Did they go all wibbly wobbly and suddenly have like fingers traveling through their skin and then they appear in a black suit and sunglasses?
Yep, all that.
Wow, they really are Agent Smiths from the Matrix. With that, though, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. If you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Below this video, you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supply to Octopus Energy. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on either premiering stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
With me, but the thing about it is I'm a bit not sensitive to it, but I kind of jump on that stuff because I've gotten a lot of it. And there was another guy then who was sent the joke, but the joke was pretty okay, so I went, okay, fair enough. It was a kind of a Irish paddy joke. I went, fair enough. It was a joke I'd laugh at myself, so I don't mind. If it's funny, it's funny. But if it's not funny, then there's some kind of bitterness in that.
Yeah, but Brian, the underlying thing is that we're dumb flat earthers. You know that, right?
Can I just remind everybody that Mr. Sensitive, not Mr. Sensible, Mr. Sensitive, if you do something like that against him, he phones the police.
Yeah, I was going to say this on the live show. A lot of it's projection.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, when I knew when I was saying, I knew when I asked him, I said, "Are you being racist with me?" I knew that was going to set off alarm bells, because if you said something, if he was, let's say, if he was of an ethnicity or whatever, and you said something like that to him, then there would be a problem. You know, I'd say he wouldn't even ask you; he'd just report you.
Don't justify you playing the race card. I mean, I can get away with it because I'm 14.5% Irish, so I can definitely get away with ribbing Brian or Pete Shea.
Wait a second. How much Irish are you?
What did I just say? 14.5%.
Yeah, statistics are made up. 20%
I
of
was
all
going to say, I'm sure
statistics
Nathan's just made that up on the spot.
I'm Irish.
But Brian, if you're in the area, I do need me drive tarmacking.
That's an outrage, right? Outrage.
Bearing in mind my surname's Riley and my whole family's from Ireland, it's fine.
Yeah,
what percentage are you?
Anthony's family are probably more Irish than I am.
Here in America, every St. Patrick's Day, everybody wants to be Irish.
Why do
to County Offaly?
Why do Irishmen wear 2 condoms?
Don't know.
Go on. Boy.
To be sure.
It's all right. I'm from the South. I face the hillbilly stereotype all the time.
No, not you.
Yeah, friendly race
you
people
don't
only.
want this round out.
If it's in good spirits, you know.
A hick and a stick, you mean?
I got told off yesterday, Anthony, for ribbing you too hard. You know how I occasionally give you the talk about ribbing Arwin too hard. I got that talk from Neil about you yesterday.
Yeah, because you do get on Anthony a lot.
Anthony's
He gets it back though.
Let's give him a shit sandwich. Anthony's a very, very intelligent man. Therefore, my standards are very high. And when he does dumb shit, I'm going to call him on it. However, he's bright enough and intelligent enough to take it.
Listen, I take the piss out of Nathan too. I mean, sometimes I'll deliberately interrupt him just as he interrupts Arwin to stop shouting at him for whatever.
And that's what mates do.
Yeah, that's what it. Yeah, that is the way it is.
No, don't bring Arwin into this too much. He'll get all sensitive about it.
He'll summon Baldwin.
Arwinian units. No, he'll summon the Arwinian units.
Hey, you. Arwinian units. That still makes me laugh now. Because he throws it in at the right time. He's like, no, it's 1AU. And just as he knows I'm about to launch into ripping a new one for AU or astronomical units, he's like, Arwinian units.
It's 3 to the sun, by the way. 3 Arwinian units.
It is 3 Arwinian units to the sun, as opposed to 1 astronomical unit.
I like the way you picked that as well.
I'm sure if we pushed hard enough, we'd find out that... In fact, I think we did once push, and we found out that the Arwinian unit is just a derivative of the AU. Hence it's 3, exactly.
It's still flexible.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we can change the size of Venus if we choose to.
Just add a bit of maths.
We don't have to make it. That's something I've never discussed here, right? While they do assume Venus is Earth's twin, Kepler's third law doesn't require that in the slightest. And it didn't, and it hasn't, and it's been changed. You know, whatever you want to pick for the scaling value.
What's Kepler's third law, Nathan?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's how you get the scaling math. You know it, and I lean on you every time, you bastard. Don't expose my failings here, Anthony.
It's just the ratio of how far away they believe the planets are relative to the astronomical unit. So they can
that's exactly
scale
what I
it,
said.
They can't quantify it.
That's exactly what I said. Yeah. The vague description you gave me is what I repeated, not knowing, you bastard.
Yeah. That's all it is.
Anyway, the point is you can change those scaling values. You don't have to apply Venus as Earth's twin. That isn't a necessity. That's just what they do now. You can apply any scaling value you like.
Well, that went down well.
Well, no, it's Orwellian. It's Orwellian, right? In terms of his disclaimers for flat Earth in 1984, he's not specifically saying that you can make the ground flat or curved. He's saying the stars can be made close or far. You know, you can apply that scale at any scale you like, but you can always do it within the assumption. It doesn't change anything in terms of the mechanics of what you'll see if you change those scales.
Where is Arwin today?
He's here.
Oh, he's here. He's just probably going off doing shopping.
He'll come back in about 10 minutes. He'll ask us to summarise the last 30 minutes of conversation when something really heated's going on while he's got a mouthful of food or something.
Yeah. Then he comes back and wants to know what happened.
Well, before he comes back, Anthony, go into Kepler's again. I missed it because Nathan rumpused you at that point. What were you
Kepler's
saying?
third law is basically the scale, but it's not the quanta. So it's like, because they're putting the distances of the planets in the form of one astronomical unit away from the, like, obviously 1 AU is the distance of Earth to the sun. Then they scale out the rest of it relative to that scale, but they don't know any of the distances. So they've got to get a distance from somewhere. So what they do is they assume that Venus is the same size as Earth, and then therefore they've got an actual distance if you assume that. Well, once you do that, then you can quantify the rest of the solar system. But until you do that, you're left with the scale, but with no distances. So the scale is infinitely variable. So it can be as far away or as big as you want, depending on how far away you want to push it. The smaller and bigger it has to be, the closer it comes, and so on. It's just scale. That's all.
Okay, hang on. So go back to what you said earlier, because I went a little fast. So their baseline is begging the question.
Yes.
Yeah, this what we're discussing now is all under the heliocentric assumption. Yes, Ted, this is all begging the question fallacy. Yes.
The scale is built on the assumption of the heliocentric model, so it requires the assumption of orbits for the explanation of the transit and the differentials of the planets, particularly. So it requires all of those to be assumed to be described as in the heliocentric model. Then you build the scale that fits the observations, and then you apply whatever you want to that. But it's littered with assumption first, isn't it? The scales are built from the primary assumption of the heliocentric model, so it's a sun-based rotation as opposed to what we observe, which is everything rotating over us.
Well, without measuring R, it's utter nonsense, isn't it?
Yes. Well, I think that's 10th man's point. He's saying, isn't this all based on the pre-assumption that we're on a sphere? Who's rustling? That we're on a sphere.
I think Anthony's doing painting or something.
No, it wasn't me.
Probably you moving your mouse with your mic gain turned back up.
That damn mouse.
Someone's writing. The thing about it is this, right? Now, all this was absolutely destroyed by Rumpus recently, right? When he admitted that when they were talking about angular size change on Brandon's, Rumpus admitted, this is what Rumpus said. He said, no, there is no angular size change to the stars because they're only a point source. They're too small to have an angular size change. They're just a point source of light. So they know that what they're looking at in the sky are just point sources of light. So that means they had to have only been making up stories about them. Because if they're just a point source of light, or any of these things are just point sources of light, then that means they have to have been just making up a big story. Because how could they know, right? How could they even get to the point of saying, well, Venus very likely is about the same size as the Earth we think it is and the size it is, when what they're looking at is just a point source.
Well, there's actually a very good story behind that, Brian. It's ingenious, isn't it not, Anthony?
Are you talking about Tycho Brahe?
No. We will come
Christian
to Tycho Brahe
Huygens.
because he's part of this. I've been waiting for the time to interject Tycho Brahe, but no, Christian Huygens, in terms of his assumption, was described as, I believe, ingenious.
I can put it on screen if you want, Nathan. It's in one of my tabs.
Yeah, that would be great. Can you see Anthony's screen, Brian?
Shout out to Jimmy.
I'm just going to dig it out now. Imported.
While Anthony's digging this out, right? Anthony sat on this for about 6 straight months, waiting for somebody to mention Christian Huygens, right? And he sat at the back of the room with the mic wide open, as he does, and then sprints out of his seat when he hears this guy, Jimmy, mention it in passing. And he's like choking on whatever he's eating, going, oh, did you mention Huygens? It was classic.
Yeah, Jimmy's had 2 mentions in the show, right? He got mentioned earlier on for doing the exact same thing.
Correct. While Nathan was starting the show, we were talking about him.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just pause this game I'm playing in the background so I don't lose anything. Right, so it says, this is from NASA. Huygens wanted to give the sizes of these objects relative to the size of the Earth. He knew the relative distances, that's Kepler's third law. He knew the relative distances of the planets, but in order to convert his angular measurements into Earth diameters, he needed to find the distance from the Earth to the Sun in Earth diameters. Huygens solved this problem with an assumption. If he supposed that the planet Venus had the same size as Earth, he could then calculate the distance in Earth diameters from his measurement of its angular size. Then with the Copernican theory, he could calculate for the time of the observation a theoretical distance to the planet in terms of the radius of the Earth's orbital circle, the astronomical unit in our terms. Knowing the same distance in astronomical units and in Earth diameters, he might then calculate the length of an astronomical unit of the unit in Earth diameters. He might then repeat the assumption and the calculation for Mars. This is how you get the distances. Once you get one, if you assume one, you then get them all. And then it says, when one averages the results obtained from Venus with those obtained from Mars, one replaces the assumption that both planets are of the same size as Earth. I might have missed a bit where I'm really looking for.
No, you did. You said it was your first sentence.
I might have gone past it. It's been a while since I've looked at this.
It's all useful anyway. Don't worry. The fact that you've read past it is still useful.
Slipping,
have I gone past
Anthony,
it?
you're slipping.
I love the use of the word assumption numerous times. I love that. Keep going.
Well, so far, while Anthony finds his place, all that's been detailed so far is Christian Huygens making the assumption that Venus is the same size as a presupposed spherical Earth. So he's trying to quantify these mechanisms that he just needs to scale. And he's going, the way I need to scale them is in regards to one Earth unit, one Earth as a sphere unit. What can I use in the sky? I'll use Venus. I'll assume Venus has the same exact size as Earth. Hence, you end up with Venus being described as Earth's twin. Why? Well, because Huygens assumed it was the same as Earth. It's as simple as that. So they've got a presupposed spherical Earth, and now they've got a Venus that's the same size as a presupposed spherical Earth in a presupposed orbit falling around the sun. Heliocentric, meaning that...
How'd they get away with
Neil! Heliocentric, meaning they're assuming things are falling around the sun. So orbit is this begging the question fallacy of things falling around the sun. In this 10th man highlighted this earlier. This presupposition that we've got a heliocentric system. All of it's based on that to begin with. So everything's falling around the sun, and other things are falling around other lights. But this document that Anthony's now having me buy more and more time for him until he interrupts me, is describing Huygens assuming Venus is the same size as a presupposed spherical Earth.
Yeah, let me read it again. I did read over it and I missed it. I've not read this for a while. It says, Huygens wanted to give the sizes of these objects relative to the size of the Earth. He knew the relative distances of the planets, but in order to convert his angular measurements into Earth diameters, he needed to find the distance from the Earth to the Sun in Earth diameters. Huygens solved this problem with an assumption. This is begging the question. If he supposed that the planet Venus had the same size as Earth, he could then calculate the distance in Earth diameters from his measurement of its angular size. And then with the Copernican theory, he could calculate blah, blah, blah. It goes on from there. But the key point is that if you assume that the Venus is the same size as Earth, that came from, we all know that Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth based on sticks and shadows. Well, if you assume that Earth's got a circumference based on sticks and shadows, and then assume that Venus is the same size as Earth, hey, you've got a solar system just in the maths.
The reason you're tripping up on yourself is because this isn't the document you would refer to previously. You referred to a document where it's someone reporting on what Christian Huygens does, and they report his assumption as being ingenious. This is the actual document that he wrote, as opposed to the report on the document that he wrote by somebody else. So it's not this that you've referenced before, but useful to have more of it. More chunks read out is good. So don't stress yourself.
That word, Nathan, struck me. Ingenious.
Me too.
So I did look it up, and I think the last bit, when it relates to a person, clever, original, or inventive, inventive's quite interesting. But when it's relating to a machine or an idea, cleverly or originally devised and well suited to its purpose. I think it's probably quite telling if you consider what would be the purpose of having to assume these things to do them. The purpose is to reify a model. So very ingenious in that way, in that it does allow a reification of a model. I don't think it has validity, but I would say yes, very ingenious.
Yeah.
So they considered it ingenious instead of like questioning it. Like, how did they allow them to just get away with assuming all these things? That's what I want to know.
It's inserting as many steps as possible between the original assumption and what you're actually performing as a task. So in this case, we've got the end result being the task of scaling the universe. We've got the original presupposition of the Earth being a sphere. And if you can put as many steps in that process in between, then it's just going to get a thumbs up all round. So the original assumption, Earth being a sphere, then the assumption that you've got orbits, Earth falling around the sun. In fact, I've got those in the wrong order. Let's start that again. Start with the presupposition that Earth is a sphere falling around the sun. So you've got two presuppositions. Then you assume Venus is the same size as Earth, so you can get the scaling values to make the assumption of the orbital mechanics within the heliocentric system. Well, that's a very long process that detracts or distracts away from you assuming Earth as a sphere. Simple. Lots of steps is good.
Well, I'd like to just point out there's two things. First of all, what I said earlier that kind of led to this document being taken out about Rumpus, how Rumpus admitted, without realizing it, by trying to win a point, he stated that all the lights in the sky are just point sources. They don't have any angular size. They're just a point source of light. And in this, it's claimed that Christian Huygens, right, studied the angular size of Venus. Yet they freely admit they're just point sources. They don't have an angular size. They're just a point source of light. But yet they have supposed angular size now, or they did supposedly have an angular size according to Huygens. There's a massive contradiction, because the truth is they are just point sources of light. They probably don't have, no, I haven't checked it, but they probably don't have any actual angular size because they're just so small. They're just a point source of light. And you can't give them an angular size. You don't even know how far away they are or what they are. But secondly to that, what Nathan was just saying there about the Earth falling around the sun, that is debunked by Einstein, because space-time is flat. So there's no falling around. It's all this is another big contradiction of their model. Space-time is flat. Nothing is falling around anything. Nothing. Everything is on an equal level plane. That's space-time.
No, that's not true. So the sun is creating a curve in space-time akin to a well, and the Earth is moving around that curved space-time in an orbit. So it is still, in Einsteinian mathematics, falling around the sun. Sorry to correct you on that.
Yeah, but it's not falling at an angle. You see the word falling. There's no angle. There's no angle difference. The point is that the center of the Earth in that model, in the space-time model, and the center of the other planets and the center of the sun are all on an equal line. They're all on the same horizontal line.
Yeah.
The well that's created by the sun. The well that's created by the sun is supposedly, but see, that's another thing as well. That's incorrect too, because the well that the sun creates, like Earth, is not within that well. There's space-time between the Earth and the sun, and that's flat. This is the thing. Einstein, if you look into what Einstein, see, the reason people think that is because they look at these demonstrations where they put these balls onto blankets. Now, this kind of nonsense, onto tarpaulins. And the big ball goes in the center and it weighs down the center and everything starts falling in around it. That's not, if you look into it, that is not what Einstein was that is not it. Einstein didn't actually show it that way. Einstein's space-time is flat. And let's just say between the Earth and the sun, it's flat. There's a flat piece of space-time, right, between the Earth and the sun. It's all horizontal.
Okay, but we're into now arguing about pseudo-Riemannian force space and how matter bends the space-time in order for this orbital mechanical description in pseudo-force space works. That's what we're arguing about, right? How it works, but it doesn't work. Yeah. It's not. This isn't anything real.
Well, it falls apart too because it's relying on the radius. They're inserting a mathematical.
It's true.
Like,
We're laughing at John
Radius.
because his timing is impeccable. It needs John, while I'm contemplating the vast nature of us begging the question, to just come in and say, you do realise this entire argument is moot because this entire argument is based on a radius value that's debunked. Yeah, we're talking about it. 10th pointed out really early on. Isn't this all based on a presupposition? Yeah, it's based on a heliocentric presupposition. Well, what's that based on again? R. So you need John to come on and say, yeah, we've debunked R, by the way, lads, because it sums it up nicely at the end, doesn't it?
I also wanted to put into the mix, because that is what you just said, that is the straw that breaks the back of the ballers. But even prior to that, in King's Dethroned, in Cathexis, he actually reads the whole book on his channel. And I ordered the book. And it's interesting. It's all about this guy, Hippocrates. And he just, for whatever reason, I can't remember now, but he just said, okay, everything is really far away. And everyone that came after him said, okay, we got to base everything on what that guy just said. Everything is really, really far away. Okay, well, where's the proof that everything is really, really far away? I mean, he just made that up. But then everything that went after him couldn't deny that. And so, like you said, Nathan, earlier, it isn't just one statement. It's each piece builds upon the previous presupposition.
Well, let's actually entertain a bit of that. I was just about to round out, but I'm not going to because I've just remembered that Brian wanted to talk about Tycho Brahe, and that links in beautifully. You still there, Brian?
Oh yeah. Well, about what happened with Tycho Brahe, yeah, that he sarcastically said that for the lights in the sky that we're seeing to be that far away, they would have to be humongous in size, and they just ran with that sarcasm, didn't they, Nathan?
Yeah, they reverse engineered his criticism into being the actual rhetoric. So it kind of, if it was to be dramatised, it'd be, well, they'd have to be enormous, says Tycho Brahe. And they all scratch their heads and say, they're enormous.
They did a Newton on him then.
Ingenious.
Well, that's so often the case that an objection, if it's model-based, we're not talking about reality, you can just change the model. And that was what was told to Wakey Wakey when I believe it was an astrophysicist lady that he interviewed, and he explained that there was problems with the model, hadn't disclaimed that he was a flat earther at this stage, and he asked her, well, what do you do in those circumstances? She said, well, you should change the model. Obviously the model's wrong, so you've got to make an adjustment then, haven't you? Well, in this instance, I suspected this years ago, we've got to be careful what we say, and it was Arwin that I was attacking on this score, I'll add that in here, because Arwin recognised this and then decided he could commercialise it. I'll add that as well. If you offer up too many exasperated objections, they might be reverse engineered and used as part of the rhetoric. I mean, it's not exactly the same as Bob Nodell having his gyro used against him. That's slightly different. But an objection that's well positioned enough may become part of the rhetoric. We've seen it with us. Certain parts of curve calculations that change, get added, removed. Those are based on the objections. Like a good objection, better address that in the calculator than A. So they do. And we go, you bastards, that's our objection. And they're like, yeah, well, now it's not. It's part of the rhetoric now. Object anymore and we'll put your name on it. What's that? I think it's absurd to have gravitational attraction objects acting on them without any intervening. No. This is all nonsense. What's that, Newton? Nonsense. Let's call it Newtonian. What's that, Brahe? They're going to be massive? Yeah, Brahe, yeah. Thanks for that. That's what they do. So don't object too hard.
Yeah, because
that's what I'm saying. Ingenious. For the model, it's ingenious.
Well, that's why apparently now, when asked if the Earth is a sphere with a radius of 3959 miles, is that your claim? No, that sounds like your claim.
You guys should see.
Show me where it's the baller's claim.
That's not exactly what I mean. No. Let's rephrase it. Imagine if you've got a computer program that you want to find the weaknesses of. The best way to do that is to employ a load of hackers to find their way into the system and hack their way into it, but with them on your side. Or, by comparison, the best way to be do it without paying them, which is us, if you want to look at it from this light. So, okay, the heliocentric model's got little cracks in it. Let's see how wide our opponents, who are a very well-contained opponent, can widen those cracks. Because then we can pour cement in them. That's what they're doing. So we widen up the crack and go, look, here's a really glaring flaw or defect or what's the word I'm looking for? Like an exposed flaw, like a hacker looking for faults in the system. You know, once it's exposed, it can be corrected.
Let me give you the best real world example of this. Mick West's curve calculator on Metabunk. We were pointing out that there's no water wall in front of us obstructing things. So what does he do? He just removes the bulge value out of the curve calculator because now they don't claim it.
No, and made the
Well, I have an example also.
He also
Sorry, I was
said
trying to get in there.
that the curve calculator is no longer applicable for viewing things over large volumes of water.
Yeah, but disclaimer is that was a bit weak, but yes, that's a good example. Both of those are good examples. Those are kind of what I was hinting at, actually. Who was it? Eli that wanted to get a word in before we round out.
Yes, I've also posted in Master B the updated version of the rebuttal to the impossible Selenilian eclipse. So it just never ends.
We'll have to check that out tomorrow.
Whereas before on the flatter.ws site, which is like debunking quote unquote flat earth, before they were talking about the Selenilian eclipse and they were just talking about it being refracted above the horizon. They didn't say anything about a shadow being upside down. Well, you know, begging the question of a shadow in the first place. But now they're addressing it in this what I posted in Master B, and it's crazy as hell.
Fair enough. We'll have to check it out tomorrow. With that, though, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's after show possible. Of course, a massive thank you to all of you in either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams for hopefully smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, and joining as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member. Also, below this video, you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.